The clock strikes murder. The rain had begun as a whisper upon the hills and now fell in a steady rhythm, 1,000 tiny fingers drumming against the roof of the carriage. Hercule Poirot sat with immaculate posture, gloved hands folded neatly over the silver-headed cane that rested across his knees. Every droplet upon the window seemed to fascinate him. It fell, slid, and merged with another, an elegant demonstration of order within chaos. Ashford Hall appeared through the mist like a memory half-remembered, a grand country estate of dark stone, standing proud against the pale English sky. The detective's sharp eyes took in every detail, the ivy that climbed too high, the cracked corner of a shutter, the faint wisp of smoke curling from a chimney. Disorder, however small, never escaped the notice of Hercule Poirot. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of lavender polish and damp wool. A butler, grey as the weather outside, took his hat and coat with mechanical precision. "Lady Ashford awaits you in the drawing-room, sir." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, my good man." He paused to adjust the angle of a portrait that hung slightly crooked on the wall, then followed the butler down the corridor. Every few steps, the floor creaked as though the house itself whispered of old secrets. The drawing-room was a portrait of English comfort, velvet chairs, a roaring fire, and a tea service gleaming upon a polished tray. Lady Margaret Ashford rose to greet him, tall, elegant, her expression carrying the delicate fatigue of one who smiles through worry. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "thank you for coming on such short notice." Poirot bowed. "It is I who must thank you, madam, for rescuing me from the tedium of London rain. You wrote that the matter was urgent?" Her fingers twisted a lace handkerchief. "I cannot explain it entirely. My husband believes I'm foolish, but I know, something dreadful is about to happen." Before Poirot could answer, the door opened and Sir Harold Ashford entered, his manner brisk and authoritative. "Ah, Poirot. My wife's imagination has run away with her, I'm afraid. But since you're here, perhaps you can join us for tea. We're expecting several guests this afternoon." Poirot's eyes gleamed with amusement. An excellent opportunity, perhaps, to observe English society in its natural habitat, eh? By 3 o'clock the guests had arrived. There was Edmund Vale, the family lawyer, thin-lipped and polished like a blade. His young wife, Clara, wore beauty like armor, soft eyes that hid sharp thoughts. The nephew, Edward Ashford, lounged near the fire, his smile too quick, his laughter too loud. Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, hovered in the background like a watchful crow, while a newcomer, a Mr. Gray, introduced vaguely as a business acquaintance, stood apart, studying everyone with quiet curiosity. The conversation fluttered between trivialities, weather, politics, and the dreadful rise of jazz. Poirot, seated with his tea, observed in silence. He watched the minute tremor of a hand, the flicker of envy in a glance, the way Sir Harold's jaw tightened whenever the lawyer spoke. He noted how the great clock above the mantel ticked with ponderous dignity, its pendulum slicing the air with mechanical precision. At precisely 3:30, the clock began to chime. Once, twice, 3 times. The guests fell silent, as though the sound carried something heavy, inevitable. Then came the gunshot. It cracked through the stillness like a whip. Lady Margaret screamed. Edward dropped his glass, it shattered upon the hearth. Poirot was already on his feet. "Come," he said sharply, that was from the study. They ran down the corridor, their footsteps echoing through the high-ceilinged hall. The study door was locked. Sir Harold pounded upon it. "Vale. Edmund. Are you all right?" Silence. Only the soft hiss of rain beyond the windows. Poirot bent close, listening, then nodded to the butler. Together they forced the door. The room beyond was thick with gunpowder and the scent of burnt paper. Edmund Vale sat slumped over his desk, a dark stain spreading across his waistcoat. Beside him, the revolver gleamed dully in the firelight. Papers lay scattered, an overturned ink bottle bleeding across the carpet. Poirot approached slowly. His gaze moved from the body to the revolver, from the revolver to the clock upon the mantelpiece. Its hands stood frozen at 3:30. "How curious," he murmured. Sir Harold whispered hoarsely, "Good God, suicide." Poirot shook his head. "Non, non, mon ami. Observe, the gun lies upon the floor, beyond the reach of his arm. The burn marks are upon the left sleeve, yet he is right-handed. Suicide, you say? No. Someone wished us to believe so." He crouched, examining the papers upon the desk. One document bore Vale's signature, an amended will, dated only that morning. Poirot folded it carefully. A man changes his will, and within the hour, he is dead. Does that not tell us a little story? Lady Margaret swayed. He was helping Harold with business affairs, land, inheritance, that sort of thing. "Ah," said Poirot softly. "Business affairs. The soil from which many crimes do grow." He straightened, dusting his hands. "No one shall leave this house. Until the police arrive, we shall preserve everything exactly as it is." Mrs. Danvers nodded stiffly. Edward protested, "But, Mr. Poirot, surely you don't suspect one of us?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "My young friend, I suspect everything until it proves itself innocent. Even the clock, if it ticks too loudly." He turned back to the mantelpiece, studying the stopped clock. 3:30, he repeated. It stopped at the moment of death, or perhaps it was stopped for the moment of death. Outside, thunder rolled over the moors. Inside, silence thickened like fog. Poirot felt it, the invisible tremor of fear moving through the room. Somewhere among these polite faces, a murderer watched him, heart beating in time with the storm. He spoke quietly to the constable who had come running from the gatehouse. "You will secure every exit. No one enters or leaves. And please, bring me the guests, each of them, one by one. I should like to ask a few little questions." The first to enter was Lady Margaret. She sat opposite him, pale but composed. "Madam," Poirot began gently, "you feared something dreadful would happen. How did you know?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know, but Edmund and Harold quarreled yesterday, about money, I think. Harold said Vale was dishonest." "Did he threaten him?" She hesitated. "Only in anger, I'm sure." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And at the moment of the shot, where were you?" "In the drawing room, with Mrs. Danvers and Clara. We were taking tea." "Bon. I will verify this." He gave her a reassuring smile, but as she left, his eyes narrowed. Fear, guilt, grief, too many emotions for one heart, perhaps. Next came Edward Ashford, nervous, defiant. He admitted he disliked Vale. "He treated my uncle like a fool. Always whispering in corners, always taking notes." Poirot noticed the young man's sleeve, tiny spots of ink. "You write much, monsieur?" Edward flushed. Yes, sometimes." "Letters? To whom?" He stammered. "To no one that matters." Poirot made a note. "Every detail matters." Then came Clara Vale, the widow. Her voice was soft, almost melodic. She spoke of her husband with careful detachment, neither grief nor hatred. Poirot watched her hands, steady, unshaking. Too steady. "You heard the shot, madam?" "Yes. It came from his study. But Edmund often worked with his revolver nearby, he said it gave him comfort." "Comfort," Poirot repeated, smiling faintly. "An unusual form of relaxation." Finally, the stranger, Mr. Gray, entered. Tall, serious, with the calm of a man accustomed to command. He claimed to have met Sir Harold only once before, on business concerning railway shares. Poirot's gaze lingered on him. "And yet, monsieur, you arrived uninvited, did you not?" Gray's lips curved slightly. One might say fate invited me. Poirot tilted his head. Fate, or convenience? Gray merely smiled. Night fell heavy over Ashford Hall. The police arrived, led by Inspector Benson, a burly man who respected Poirot's brilliance but distrusted his methods. Together they examined the study again. "There's no sign of struggle," Benson said. "Could be suicide after all." Poirot crouched by the window. Rainwater glistened upon the sill, though the carpet below was dry. "The window was opened after the shot, Inspector. Our killer wished us to believe the murderer escaped this way, but the mud outside tells another story." He held up a footprint card the constable had taken. 2 sets of prints, one fresh, one old. The old pair are larger, the boots of a man accustomed to the grounds. The fresh ones, smaller, lighter, perhaps a woman. Benson whistled softly. "You're suggesting the lady did it?" Poirot smiled. "I suggest nothing, my friend. I only observe. Observation is the mother of truth." He rose, adjusting his cuffs. "Tomorrow morning, we shall have the guests assembled in the library. By then, the picture will be clearer. The murderer has made one mistake, and I have already seen it." "What mistake?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "He, or she, forgot that even a stopped clock tells the truth twice a day." The storm raged through the night. In the dim corridor, Poirot walked alone, the flame of his candle throwing long shadows across the portraits of generations past. Somewhere in the house, a door creaked, somewhere else, a whisper faded into silence. He paused at the study door, gazing once more at the motionless clock. 3:30, he murmured. "The hour of death, the hour of truth. We shall see which." He turned away, the echo of his footsteps merging with the distant roll of thunder. The first act of the mystery had closed, but within the walls of Ashford Hall, the clock waited patiently to strike again. The guests of Ashford Hall. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the countryside washed clean and pale beneath a thin, watery sun. Ashford Hall looked almost peaceful from the outside, but inside its corridors the air was heavy with unease. No one had slept. Servants moved like ghosts, doors opened and closed in hushed rhythm. In the breakfast room, a silver coffee pot steamed upon the table, untouched. Poirot entered precisely at 8 o'clock, his attire flawless as ever. "Good morning, Ms. Amos," he said cheerfully, though the smile in his eyes was sharp as glass. "Sleep, I fear, has deserted Ashford Hall. But courage, we shall find her again when truth returns." Sir Harold sat at the head of the table, face grey from whiskey and worry. "Inspector Benson's men are searching the grounds," he said. "We'll have this cleared up soon enough." Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed, but before the search yields its fruit, we must know the orchard. Let us speak of the guests. 1. Sir Harold and Lady Margaret." He began with the hosts. Sir Harold's temper was legend in local gossip, so too were his debts. Poirot examined a bank statement found in the study, columns of figures that bled red ink. Vale had been pressing him for repayment, the will sign that morning hinted that Harold stood to lose half his estate. When questioned, Harold struck the table with his palm. "Vale was extorting me. The man found a technicality and meant to ruin us." Lady Margaret flinched at his anger. "Harold, please." Poirot observed them both. In the small details, the way her hand trembled when he raised his voice, the way he refused to meet her eyes, there lay a history no account book could show. "You quarreled last night," Poirot said quietly. Harold looked away. "Every marriage has quarrels. But few have a dead lawyer the next afternoon." He made a small note in his pocket diary and moved on point 2. Edward Ashford. Edward awaited him in the library, pacing. The young man's charm of the previous evening had evaporated, now he looked hunted. "Mr. Poirot, I didn't kill him." "You've got to believe that." Poirot raised a brow. I believe nothing. I observe. You were close to the study when the shot was fired. I was in the smoking room, Edward protested. Ask anyone. Indeed, and you left the drawing room before the shot. Why? Edward hesitated. I went to fetch matches. Poirot smiled thinly. A very long journey for a very small flame, none. He noted a smear of mud upon the young man's shoe. Outside footprints, smaller and lighter, perhaps a woman's, had puzzled Poirot last night. Yet the shape of Edward's boots matched the older set, the ones that crossed the garden often. He filed the thought away. 3. Clara Vale. The widow received him in her room, sunlight spilling across a dressing table crowded with perfume bottles and handkerchiefs embroidered with an elegant C. She had wept, yet her eyes were clear. Madam, Poirot began, you are brave. But there are questions that must be asked. Of course. Your husband changed his will yesterday morning. Did you know? No, she said softly. Though I suspected something. Edmund was restless lately, nervous. He said he was protecting me. Protecting you, from what? She looked out the window. From himself, perhaps. He was afraid of someone, Mr. Poirot. He never said whom. Poirot caught the faint scent of gun oil mixed with rose perfume upon her sleeve, a trace that would have meant nothing to most. To him, it whispered possibility. 4. Mrs. Danvers. In the servants' corridor, Mrs. Danvers met him with folded arms. If you want my opinion, sir, it's the young master. Always creeping about after dark. Mr. Vale knew something, and now he's paid for it. Poirot smiled politely. Opinions, madam, are like clocks, most show the wrong time. Her eyes narrowed. You think I'm hiding something? Only that you hear more than others notice. Tell me, did you hear anything unusual yesterday before the shot? She hesitated. I heard voices in the study. 2 men arguing. Then Mr. Vale said, 3:30, then, it's settled. That was around 2:30. 3:30, Poirot repeated softly. Again the hour of destiny. 5, Mr. Gray. Last came the stranger. He stood at the window of the guest chamber, hands clasped behind his back. You know, he said calmly, you play the part of the continental philosopher quite well, Mr. Poirot. And you, monsieur, play the part of the honest visitor too well, Poirot replied. You were never a business associate of Sir Harold. Gray turned, expression unreadable. No. I am a private investigator, employed by a firm in London. Mr. Vale hired me to look into irregularities in Sir Harold's accounts. He wanted proof before confronting him. Poirot's brows rose. So Vale was about to expose his employer. How very dangerous. Gray nodded. I was to meet him at 3:30, in the study. When I arrived, the shot had already been fired. For a long moment, Poirot said nothing. Then, did you tell this to Inspector Benson? No. My employer's confidentiality survives his death. Poirot sighed. Ah, professional honor, it complicates the pursuit of truth, does it not? The gathering. By afternoon, Poirot requested that everyone assemble in the library. The great room smelled of books and tension. Sunlight fell through stained glass windows, painting red and gold upon the carpet like blood and gold dust. My friends, he began, we stand surrounded by facts, yet the pattern is hidden. Permit me to rearrange the pieces. He described what he had learned, the altered will, the quarrel, the secret investigation, the mysterious phrase 3:30. Every face before him stiffened differently, fear in some, guilt in others. Sir Harold blustered. This is outrageous. You accuse us all. I accuse no one, Poirot replied. I merely point out that the murderer is among us, and that he, or she, has already lied. He placed upon the table the clock from the study. Its hand still read 3:30. This clock was not broken. It was stopped deliberately. Inside, the mechanism is fine, only the key has been turned backward, a trick to halt the gears at any chosen moment. Lady Margaret gasped. You mean, someone staged the time? Exactment. The question is why? He produced a small brass key. I found this behind the curtains of the drawing room. It fits the clock perfectly. Who among you would tamper with it? Silence. Then Mrs. Danvers spoke tremulously. I saw Mr. Edward with that key yesterday morning. He was fixing the clock for Lady Margaret. Edward turned white. I did no such thing. Poirot raised a finger. Calmly, mon ami. Perhaps you did not. But someone wished it to appear so. He began to pace. There is another clue, the footprint beneath the window. A woman's shoe, small, heeled. Lady Margaret, you seldom go to the garden, Mrs. Danvers, you wear flat soles, Madame Vale, however. Clara's breath caught. I did not go outside. It was raining. Poirot's eyes softened. It was. And yet the hem of your gown bears a faint stain of mud, recently dried. She covered her face. I went to the window after I heard the shot, I wanted air. I was terrified. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. Or perhaps you wished to drop something, a key or a note. He produced a crumpled scrap of paper from his pocket. Upon it were 3 words in Vale's hand, 3:30. This was found beneath the desk. He wrote it moments before his death. Was it an appointment, or a warning? The guest stared at the paper as if it might speak. Somewhere in the corridor a clock struck 4, its echo trembled through the silence. Poirot bowed slightly. My work for today is done. The picture grows clearer, but the final brushstroke is missing. Tomorrow, Mes Amos, we shall have the truth, and perhaps another tragedy if we are not careful. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Remember, he said softly, murderers do not sleep well. Tonight, one heart in this house will beat too fast for rest. I intend to listen for it. Outside, dusk crept across the lawns. A lone figure moved behind the curtains of an upstairs window, watching Poirot as he crossed the courtyard toward his room. A hand drew back, revealing the glint of a small silver object, a revolver, cleaned and reloaded. The night was far from over at Ashford Hall. The web of lies. The night at Ashford Hall was long and sleepless. The storm had rolled away, but in its place came a stillness so deep it felt unnatural, a silence that listened back. Poirot sat by the small fire in his chamber, notebook open, mustache perfectly symmetrical despite the hour. On the table lay the clues, the altered will, the stopped clock key, the torn scrap that read 3:30. Each piece told a story, yet none told the truth. He murmured to himself, order and method, Poirot. The murderer has arranged the scene as neatly as a table for tea. We must upset it, just a little, to see what spills. From below, faint footsteps creaked through the corridor. He rose, candle in hand, and opened his door a crack. A figure in a nightgown crossed the hall, Lady Margaret, moving quietly toward the study. Poirot followed. Inside the study, she knelt beside her husband's desk, rifling through drawers. When the candlelight touched her face, she gasped. Mr. Poirot. You frightened me. Forgive me, madam, he said mildly. It is late for housework. I couldn't sleep. I thought if I destroyed these letters, it would help. She held a bundle of envelopes bound with a red ribbon. Letters from whom? She hesitated. From Edmund Vale. They were written years ago, before his marriage. He and I, we were once very close. Ah, said Poirot softly, so the lawyer and the lady had once been lovers. Tears gathered in her eyes. Please, you mustn't tell Harold. He would never forgive me. Poirot regarded her kindly. Secrets, madam, are dangerous things. They multiply like rabbits and soon devour the garden. He let her burn the letters, yet made a note of the ashes' faint smell, gun oil, again. The morning after. At breakfast, tension hung thicker than the smoke from Sir Harold's cigar. Inspector Benson entered with a report. "We've finished our search, sir. No weapon besides the revolver, no footprints beyond what you found." Poirot nodded. "Yet something was found in the fireplace, was it not?" Benson frowned. "Yes, half-burnt paper. Couldn't read much. Looked like a check." Poirot took the fragment carefully. 2 words remained visible, "to Clara Vale." "Interesting," he murmured. "A payment, perhaps, or a bribe. The ashes, they speak, eh?" Sir Harold scowled. "Are you accusing my wife's friend of blackmail now?" Poirot smiled. "I accuse no one, Sir Harold. I simply listen when the ashes whisper." The vanishing maid. Before noon, a commotion stirred the household. Mrs. Danvers burst into the drawing-room, breathless. "Mr. Poirot, Elsie, the maid, she's gone. Her room's empty, bed unslept, window wide open." "Gone?" "Yes, sir. And she took one of Lady Margaret's cloaks." Poirot's eyes lit with sudden understanding. "Then, my friends, our mystery begins to quicken its pace. The servant sees everything. When she disappears, one must ask, did she flee, or was she helped to vanish?" He ordered a search of the grounds. Hours later, a gardener found the missing cloak snagged on a branch near the riverbank, torn and muddy. But of Elsie herself, no sign. To Poirot, that absence spoke louder than a scream. A meeting in the garden. That afternoon, while the others gathered restlessly indoors, Poirot strolled into the damp garden with Mr. Gray. "Tell me, monsieur," he said, "this business of yours, the investigation Vale asked you to conduct. Did it concern Sir Harold's finances alone?" Gray's gaze remained fixed upon the horizon. "Largely. But Vale also suspected someone within the household was forging his signature." "Forging?" "Yes. Documents, checks, perhaps even letters. He said he would reveal everything yesterday, at 3:30. Poirot stopped walking. "Mon Dieu. Then that hour was not chosen by the murderer. It was the hour chosen by the victim himself." Gray nodded slowly. "He told me, at 3:30, the truth will speak." Poirot turned back toward the house, his expression unreadable. "Then, monsieur, the truth spoke, with a bullet." Threads tighten. That evening, Poirot gathered everyone once again in the library. The fire crackled, but its warmth reached no one. "Mess Amos," he began, "it is time to tidy our thoughts. Consider, Mr. Vale knew something dangerous, something about forgery and money. He arranged a meeting at 3:30. Moments later, he is dead. The clock was stopped, why? To confuse the true time of the crime, or to preserve it forever? Sir Harold muttered, "This is absurd." Perhaps. Yet permit me one more absurdity. Our missing maid, Elsie, she disappears after the murder. Why? She may have seen who entered the study. And that person feared her tongue. Lady Margaret's hands trembled. "You think she's dead?" Poirot's voice softened. "I think she is silent, by choice or by force. Either way, the silence serves someone here." He produced the fragment of the check. A payment to Clara Vale. A forgery investigation. A quarrel about money. Do you not see the web forming? Clara rose, pale and shaking. "That check, Edmund wrote it to me months ago. He owed me money, nothing more." Poirot looked at her gently. "And yet it was burned yesterday, madam. Someone wished to erase that debt, or the evidence of it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand." Edmund was afraid of Harold. He said Sir Harold would kill him if he told the truth. The room erupted in voices. Harold shouted, Margaret wept, Edward cursed under his breath. Poirot raised a hand, and silence fell like a dropped curtain. "The web of lies is woven tightly," he said. "Pull one thread, and all may collapse. I beg you, speak now, before another tragedy occurs." No one answered. Another tragedy. It was near midnight when a scream cut through the house. Poirot and Benson ran toward the sound. In the corridor outside the guest rooms, servants huddled in terror. Upon the carpet lay Clara Vale, motionless, a glass of sherry overturned beside her. Poirot bent close. The scent of bitter almonds reached him at once. "Cyanide," he whispered. "So, our murderer acts again." Benson swore softly. "She was poisoned." "Suicide?" Poirot shook his head. "No glass in her hand, only beside her. And she was right-handed, yet the stain is on the left cuff. Our killer repeats his artistry." He rose slowly. "We are dealing with a mind that loves symmetry. The same hand that stopped the clock now stops a heart, both at the appointed hour." Benson frowned. "You mean the poison was given exactly?" Poirot interrupted. 3:30, the glass was poured then, though she drank it hours later. The murderer knows the power of time. Poirot's reflection. Back in his room, Poirot stared at the stopped clock upon his desk. 2 deaths, he murmured. Both bound to the same moment. Coincidence? None. Our murderer worships precision. He, or she, kills not out of passion, but of design. He wrote in his notebook. Keycap 1 Vale killed after changing will. Keycap 2 check burned, to Clara Vale. Keycap 3 made missing. Keycap 4 Margaret plus Vale equals past lovers. Keycap 5 Harold ruined financially. Keycap 6 Edward frightened. Keycap 7 Gray equals secret investigator. 7 names. 7 motives. 1 clock. He closed the notebook. Tomorrow, the web will break, and the spider will crawl into the light. Outside, the wind rose again, rustling through the ivy. In the distance, a faint splash echoed from the riverbank, as though something heavy had slipped beneath the surface. The night swallowed the sound. And somewhere in the dark, the missing maid's secret drifted quietly downstream. The silent witness. The morning broke over Ashford Hall with grim solemnity. A fog had drifted in from the river, curling like pale smoke through the hedgerows. It muffled sound, swallowed shape, and gave the entire estate an air of dreamlike menace. Poirot stood by the window of the study, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Behind him, Inspector Benson paced impatiently. "You mean to tell me," Benson said, "that Mrs. Vale didn't poison herself?" Poirot turned, his small figure composed, hands clasped neatly. "Non, mon ami. She had no reason to. She feared the truth, yes, but she feared death even more. Someone gave her that glass knowing she would drink it." "Who, then?" "Patience. We shall hear from one who saw, though she has not yet spoken." Benson frowned. "You mean the missing maid?" "Exactly. The river may hide many things, but not forever. The river's secret." That afternoon, a fisherman discovered a bundle tangled in reeds half a mile downstream. It was Elsie, the missing maid. She had not drowned easily, there were bruises on her wrists, and beneath her nails the faintest trace of blue wool, the kind from Sir Harold's favorite smoking jacket. Poirot knelt beside the covered body as the constable lifted it to the bank. His eyes were solemn, but his mind raced with order and pattern. 3 deaths now tied by 1 hour, he murmured. 3:30, the time that marks not the killing, but the beginning of truth. He straightened, brushing his gloves. "Inspector, the murderer tightens the noose around his own neck. Come, we must return to Ashford Hall before the evening bell. Confrontations. When Poirot entered the drawing room, the household awaited him like condemned prisoners. Sir Harold's face was sallow, Lady Margaret's eyes red from weeping, Edward stared into the fire, jaw clenched. Only Mr. Gray appeared calm, though a shadow lingered beneath his composure. "My friends," Poirot began softly, "the silence is broken. The maid has been found. She died soon after she vanished, she saw something she should not." Lady Margaret shuddered. "You mean she saw the murderer?" Poirot nodded. "Oui. And so she, too, was silenced. But she left us a message." He laid a small pendant upon the table. Inside, beneath cracked glass, was a tiny portrait of a woman, Lady Margaret, and beneath it, a smear of blood. "She must have snatched this in her struggle," Poirot said. "Perhaps from the murderer's clothing. The clasp is broken, note the faint streak of blue wool along the edge." Sir Harold shot to his feet. "This is preposterous. You think I killed my own servant?" Poirot's eyes flicked up, calm as ever. "I think, Sir Harold, that you have been deceived, and perhaps by someone very close to you." Margaret gasped. "How dare you?" "Ah, but it is not I who dares, madam. It is the truth." The hidden ledger. Poirot excused himself then and went straight to the study. He opened the desk drawer, the same one from which Lady Margaret had taken the letters 2 nights before. Beneath the false bottom he discovered a small leather ledger. Each page was filled with figures, withdrawals, forged signatures, and initials in a delicate, unmistakable hand, M.A. Poirot closed the book slowly. "Margaret Ashford," he whispered. So, the lady's fear was not of exposure by gossip, but by law. He returned to the library where the others still waited. "Sir Harold," he said, "you believed your lawyer sought to ruin you. In truth, he sought to protect you. He discovered that money had been withdrawn from your accounts, not by him, but by your wife." Margaret let out a small, strangled cry. "That's not true. I only meant to save us. You were losing everything, Harold, and I thought I could repair it before you found out." "By forgery?" Poirot's voice cut sharply. "You used Vale's trust to sign papers in his name. When he discovered it, he threatened to tell your husband. You met him yesterday at 3:30 to beg for mercy." Her tears spilled freely now. "He said he'd give me until the next morning, that he'd change the will to make things right. I swear I didn't kill him." Poirot watched her closely. "No, madam, you did not. But another did, one who feared the scandal as much as you did. Someone who heard your quarrel and decided that silence was worth a bullet." He turned suddenly. "Mr. Edward Ashford." Edward flinched as though struck. "That's absurd." "Is it? You were near the study when the shot was fired. You told me you went to fetch matches, yet the matches were in your pocket all along. You had motive, you knew your mother was desperate, you feared disgrace, and you acted to save her. It was an impulsive act, yes, but not a clever one." Edward's lips trembled. "You can't prove that." "Can I not?" Poirot lifted a small evidence bag. Inside lay a revolver, clean but for one tiny detail, a shred of blue wool caught near the trigger. "The weapon was found in the river this morning, near where the maid's body was recovered. You threw it there, Nsce pas." Edward's eyes darted to his mother, then to the inspector, and finally to Poirot. His voice broke. "I didn't mean to." He was shouting at her, calling her a thief. "I thought he'd strike her. I only wanted to frighten him." The gun went off. A gasp escaped Lady Margaret. "Edward, no." He buried his face in his hands. "I went back later, stopped the clock to confuse the time, burned the check, and when Elsie saw me leave the study, I panicked. I caught her that night near the stables. She said she'd tell. I didn't mean to hurt her either. She slipped, I swear. Poirot closed his eyes briefly. And Mrs. Vale? Edward's voice was barely a whisper. She guessed. I went to her room last night, begged her to stay silent. She said she would tell you everything in the morning. I poured her a drink to calm her nerves. I didn't know the poison was still in the cabinet. It was from Father's old supply, she must have switched glasses by accident. Benson stepped forward grimly. That's enough, Mr. Ashford. Lady Margaret clung to her son, sobbing. He did it for me. For me. Poirot sighed. And thus love destroys what justice would have spared. There are few tragedies more human than that. Poirot's revelation. Hours later, as Edward was taken away, Poirot stood alone in the study. The fog outside had begun to lift, and sunlight filtered through the curtains. Upon the desk, the clock still stood at 3:30. He wound it gently, and the hands began to move again, ticking softly. Benson entered. A grim business, Mr. Poirot. But you've done it again. Poirot smiled faintly. It is not triumph, mon ami, only order restored. Yet there remains one thing that troubles me. What's that? Why did Vale write those words, 3:30, before he died? He must have known something more. He picked up the torn note once more, studying the handwriting. Then he smiled, the smallest, saddest smile. Ah, he whispered. Not a message to himself, but a warning to the one who would find him. 3:30, the time at which all masks fall. The final hour. That evening, the household was nearly empty. Lady Margaret had retired to her room, shattered. Sir Harold sat alone in the library, staring into the fire. Poirot took one last walk through the garden, where autumn leaves drifted silently upon the pond. He paused by the old sundial. Its shadow fell precisely across the half-hour mark. 3:30, he murmured. So simple, yet so cruel. Time, it seems, is always the perfect accomplice. From the house came the sound of the clock chiming the hour, clear, measured, eternal. Poirot tipped his hat slightly, as if to the ghost of the man whose death had set the chain in motion. Rest now, Monsieur Vale, he said softly. Your truth has spoken. The hour of judgment. The rain returned on the morning of Edward Ashford's confession. It fell steadily, mournfully, washing the stone steps of Ashford Hall as if the heavens themselves wished to cleanse them of their secrets. The great estate seemed smaller now, hollow, like a stage after the play had ended and only the echoes remained. Poirot stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back, watching the police car disappear through the mist. Inside it sat the boy who had tried to save his mother and destroyed 3 lives in the attempt. Poor child, Poirot murmured. He wished only to protect, yet he has built a monument to his guilt. Inspector Benson joined him, cap pulled low against the rain. Well, that's the end of it, I suppose. I'll have the statement written up by tonight. The Crown will see to justice. Poirot nodded slowly. Yes. Justice of the law, though not always justice of the heart. He turned back toward the house. And yet, mon ami, something here still refuses to rest. The unfinished story. That afternoon, Poirot sat once more in the study, the room where it had all begun. The fire was low, the air faintly scented with smoke and sorrow. He opened his notebook and stared at the final page. There was one line he had never crossed out. The true murderer hides not behind guilt, but behind innocence. He tapped the pen thoughtfully. Edward confessed, yes. His tale fits the facts. And yet, one must never accept the pattern merely because it pleases the eye. Non, the pattern must ring true when touched. He rose suddenly, eyes narrowing toward the mantelpiece. The clock ticked softly again, newly wound, and now, as the hand reached 3:30, it struck once. A single chime. Poirot frowned. One chime, not two, not three. Curious. He examined the clock closely. Inside, the mechanism had been tampered with again, delicately, precisely. Not the crude work of a panicked youth, but of a hand accustomed to fine instruments. Mon Dieu, he whispered. Edward could not have done this. His hands trembled even in confession. Poirot straightened. There is still a spider in this web. Lady Margaret's secret. That evening, Poirot requested to see Lady Margaret. She sat in her room, pale but composed, the firelight glinting against the silver brush in her hands. Madam, he began, forgive this intrusion. There remains a question only you can answer. She looked up, eyes weary. You have had enough answers from me, Monsieur Poirot. What more is there? He smiled gently. A very small thing. This clock. He placed it upon the table. After your son's arrest, someone touched it again. Someone who wished it to stop, precisely at the same hour as before. Why, madam? Her hand faltered. I don't know what you mean. Non. You know perfectly. You stopped it, did you not? Margaret rose, trembling. What are you saying? Poirot's voice softened, almost tender. I am saying that your son took upon himself a guilt that was not entirely his. He fired the shot, yes, but you gave him the gun. She froze. The brush fell from her fingers. Poirot continued quietly. You feared exposure, humiliation, the ruin of your name. Vale threatened to tell your husband. When Edward found you weeping, you told him everything, and in that moment, you placed the revolver in his hand. Scare him, you said. Make him stop. And so he did. You sent your son to protect you, and when he returned, you told him to hide what had been done. You burned the check, you wiped the blood, and when the maid saw, you told Edward to deal with it. He obeyed, because he loved you. Margaret sank into the chair, face buried in her hands. I never meant for anyone to die. Poirot sighed. So often it is thus. You wished only to preserve what little peace remained, and in doing so, you destroyed it. She looked up, eyes glistening. What will you do? I shall do nothing. The law will punish the son, the mother will punish herself far more severely. He bowed his head slightly. But know this, madam, your silence killed more surely than any bullet. The farewell. By dawn, the fog had lifted. Poirot prepared to leave Ashford Hall. The police had gone, the house stood eerily quiet. Sir Harold had withdrawn into his study, refusing to see anyone. Lady Margaret remained upstairs, pale as the curtains drawn across her window. As Poirot waited by the front door, Mr. Gray approached. You're certain you won't stay another night? Poirot shook his head. No, monsieur. The air here is heavy with ghosts, and I have no talent for exorcism. Gray hesitated. You know, Poirot, I've seen many cases in my time. You always find your truth. But I wonder, is it ever worth the finding? Poirot smiled faintly. Truth, monsieur, is like the dawn. It hurts the eyes, yes, but without it, we stumble forever in the dark. He tipped his hat, stepped into the morning light, and walked down the long gravel drive toward the waiting car. Behind him, Ashford Hall loomed like a monument to pride and folly. A single chime echoed from within, 3:30. Epilogue, the letter. 2 weeks later, in his London flat, Poirot received a small envelope bearing the Ashford seal. Inside was a note in a woman's delicate hand. Monsieur Poirot. I have told Sir Harold everything. He has forgiven me, though I shall never forgive myself. Edward will face his punishment, and I shall live quietly somewhere the world cannot find me. You once said that murderers do not sleep well. You were right. Every night at 3:30, I wake, and I hear the clock. Aimé. Poirot read it twice, then placed it gently upon the mantel beside a vase of fresh white lilies. He whispered, "The clock strikes only once now, madam. And that is enough." He turned to the window, gazing out at the London skyline, where the bells of St. Paul's tolled distantly, clear, solemn, and eternal. Poirot closed his eyes. Order restored. Time moving forward once more. And somewhere, far away, the last echo of 3:30 faded into silence.